Cam Reddish is headed to the New York Knicks in a trade with the Atlanta Hawks that, quite frankly, I'm very confused by. So first up, the trade. Woj says the Hawks are trading Cam Reddish to the Knicks for a deal that includes a protected 2022 first-round pick via Charlotte. You can see the actual full details of the trade on screen. Mostly what we're discussing here is Cam Reddish leaving the Hawks in exchange for a first-round pick. There are other pieces. I'm not considering them very relevant. Recently, we've been getting a lot of rumors and reports about possible Reddish trades, these including, maybe in combination with John Collins, potentially involving getting Ben Simmons to Atlanta. I myself have done a little bit of trade machine work in which De'Aaron Fox and Ben Simmons get to Atlanta with or without Cam Reddish. We've gotten a lot of interesting things about him. And the question would be, well, why would you want to move on from a guy that is young, has potential, and this is a team in Atlanta that's probably looking more towards the future than they are in the present, given their record this year, despite making the conference finals last year? Well, the reason why would be for one of two reasons, or a combination of two reasons, I should say. One, they don't want to have to pay him. They recognize that Cam Reddish is someone that does have talent, someone that's going to demand a relatively significant contract either this offseason as an extension eligible player or 2 offseasons from now in which he would be a restricted free agent. And with players like Clint Capella, John Collins, Trae Young, Kevin Huerter already signed long-term on the roster, Bogdan Bogdanovic as well, and DeAndre Hunter, another wing and as a relatively similar player to Cam Reddish, needing a new contract relatively soon as well, they didn't want to have to commit that much salary to a player that they clearly are not convinced is all that good or will help them all that much moving forward. The other part of it is a continuing issue for Atlanta throughout the season, and that is they just have too many guys. They have too many good players that they have trouble finding significant roles, significant minutes for. And Cam Reddish became one of those players. Cam Reddish is not good enough to play 35 minutes a night, but he is also not bad enough to play less than 20 a night. And he is not alone in that distinction amongst this Atlanta roster. They have real difficulty figuring out who their best 8, 9, 10 players are on a given night, especially with all the lineups changing constantly because of protocol issues and because of injuries and things like that. And they were a prime candidate for a 2-for-1 or a 3-for-1 trade where they consolidate a couple of their assets, of which they have many, into one player that helps them significantly this season. However, I was not expecting them to just dump one of those players for what is a future protected pick that is not likely to be any better than like the mid to late teens, as Charlotte looks to be a potential playoff team this season. So let's just go ahead and get to it. We'll begin with New York because I've talked about Atlanta to begin this video a lot. This is a fantastic trade for New York. I mean, if we're grading this, this is worst case in A. All the positives, I think, are relatively clear. Cam Reddish is a player that has upside, that has potential. He was the 10th pick in the draft a couple of years ago for a reason. And if you're a New York team that I think is relatively limited in terms of their upside and their ceiling, adding high upside and high ceiling players like Cam Reddish is never a bad idea, especially when the cost is really not all that much in exchange for this first round pick. But the thing that is even better if you're a Knicks fan or the Knicks themselves is Reddish is the exact kind of player that they need. They need wings that can guard. They need guys that can play on both ends of the floor. They need someone that can score, that can shoot, and can defend. And the ideal version of what Cam Reddish could become is a perfect fit in New York. Now, whether or not he becomes any of those things still remains to be seen. And I'm sure there are a lot of NBA fans and Hawks fans that are looking at this trade and wondering why everybody's getting so upset about Cam Reddish. Maybe you don't think Cam Reddish is a very good basketball player. And I've never even been like the biggest Cam Reddish guy. I just have an issue with the asset swap, as we'll continue to get to throughout the video. The one potential downside here for New York, the reason this isn't like an absolute home run A+, is if Cam Reddish plays well enough before he needs a new contract to deserve a significant contract and then does not follow through on that promise and that potential after signing the deal, it's a significant issue because of the money that he'll be being paid. And that was really the concern for Atlanta, was he was in this weird middle ground of showing enough potential to deserve a big contract without actually having the on-court production that matches a $15 to $20 million a year guy. Now, for me personally, if I'm New York, I don't mind taking that risk. I don't mind sending a pick in exchange for Cam Reddish, and if he's good, re-signing him. That's a risk worth taking for me. For Atlanta, obviously that wasn't the case. Now, specific to the deal for Atlanta, this is the thing that surprises me. I understand their roster issues. I understand the money part of this. And I've talked about it in multiple videos this year. And if you swap out one of their other pieces that is not named Cam Reddish into this deal, I think it makes at least some amount of sense. For example, if this is Danilo Gallinari going to New York in exchange for a protected future first round pick from Charlotte, that makes total sense to me. That's a typical deadline deal of a player that is part of the team, but not necessarily a gigantic piece for Atlanta this season or moving forward. Certainly doesn't help them with their defensive issues. Someone that provides the Knicks a scoring punch, a little bit of size. The pick probably isn't super valuable to New York either. Atlanta opens up more minutes on their wing rotation for Reddish to play the 3 or the 4. And they save themselves some money. If it doesn't work out for New York, Gallinari is a non-guaranteed contract for next season. Everybody wins. That feels like a win-win trade for me. However, they chose to trade the guy that they haven't even paid yet and keep the guy in Gallinari that has been paid. Now, here's the biggest caveat of the entire video. I'm under the assumption, and I'm operating under the understanding that Cam Reddish was worth more than this via a trade. That's my biggest issue with this, is I fundamentally disagree that a first-round pick future protected from Charlotte is more valuable in a trade, whether it be this one or otherwise, than Cam Reddish. However, if Atlanta really has been shopping him to Philadelphia, to obviously New York, maybe that isn't the case. And maybe myself, as well as a lot of other people, are way overestimating the value of Cam Reddish via a trade. However, from where I'm at right now, I think Cam Reddish is worth more than that pick, which creates another issue. I would rather have, if I'm a team trading with Atlanta, for example, if I'm trying to move Ben Simmons or someone else, I would rather have Cam Reddish in that deal than this Charlotte pick. Obviously, Atlanta doesn't think that's the case, or they've had conversations with other teams that have indicated that that is not the case, and that's why they would rather have the pick than Reddish. But if we're operating under the assumption that this deal leads to some other stuff, whether it be this year or in the offseason, which I think is a pretty good assumption, it has to end up being more valuable than Cam Reddish in any other kind of deal. Maybe that'll end up being the case. It's a difficult trade to grade in the moment, because I think it's clear that not only does Atlanta get worse as a basketball team today, but in my opinion, they get worse from an asset standpoint as well. But maybe this is a scenario we've seen before. The one historical parallel that I can think of in recent memory in the NBA for a trade like this was actually just a portion of a trade. And it's the Jared Allen trade that gets him to Cleveland. He's part of the James Harden deal. Houston just doesn't want him. They're just like, you know what? We're not really a fan of Jared Allen. He also needed to be paid soon as well, similar to Cam Reddish. We'll take the pick instead. So Cleveland jumps in like, hey, we have a pick. We'll give you a pick for Jared Allen. And now, yes, he's making $20 million a year, but he's like a borderline all-star caliber 5 for them. He's playing fantastic. He's a huge part of why they're improving moving forward. And they stepped up. They paid him. But the difference between where Cleveland is now with Jared Allen and where they would have been had they not had him, or vice versa, where Houston would be if they had him rather than without him, is a huge, gigantic difference. And if you're an Atlanta fan, that's worst case scenario for you, depending on what you get for the pick. And if you're a Knicks fan, that has to be incredibly, incredibly exciting. I'm not saying Cam Reddish is going to have the same level of impact on the Knicks that Jared Allen has had on the Cavs, but it's the one-to-one comparison that I can think of a player that people don't really want because you have to pay him soon. They've shown flashes of potential, but haven't really shown as much actual on-court production as you would like, although Jared Allen was more proven at that point than Reddish is now, and to become a huge, key, foundational piece of the puzzle moving forward for New York. I think Knicks fans are going to love Cam Reddish. I think he's going to have a huge opportunity to really kind of spread his wings offensively there, and as long as he focuses on being an all-around player, continuing to be a really, really good defender when he's locked in and engaged, work on his perimeter jump shot, and not just go there and think he's going to be the next coming of Paul George. If he does the smart basketball stuff, I think this is a huge, huge win for New York. And I'm going to call it an F right now if I'm, talking about grading the Hawks, but it's kind of like a TBD grade, because if they end up using this first round pick down the road in a way that they could not have used Cam Reddish as an asset, then obviously it's a huge win. But that's a big question mark for me, and that's something we're going to be paying attention to moving forward, is how Atlanta has set themselves up moving forward. This has been a pretty smart front office to this point, and so I do want to give them the benefit of the doubt for now, but in this moment, if you're grading the trade, it's an F for Atlanta, it's an A for New York, and we'll see how things go moving forward. That's going to be the end of today's video. Thank you guys for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. Subscribe to the channel, like the video as well if you enjoyed it, and hope you guys have an awesome rest of your day, and I will see you all next time.